News!
Okay, we'll start with this. A recent Instagram post from veteran manager Brian Cohen, who said, "We are happy to start the first of many collaborations with Block 1 Sports as co-managers of the young sensation, Johanna Wonyou. This talented phenom is a former youth gold medalist, a three-time amateur French champion, and the current EBU and Commonwealth bantamweight champion. Building solid relationships equates to building world champions, and in 2024, the world will see why Johanna Wonyou has been the most avoided fighter in her division, campaigning at 118 pounds bantamweight.
Very deep division.
It's my understanding that Johanna Wonyou is a French-born fighter, a French-born national that eventually relocated to the UK, and she's based out of the UK. Now that she's being co-managed by Brian Cohen, perhaps that will open some doors for Johanna to fight right here in the US of A, sporting a professional record of 9 wins with no losses, no draws, 2 knockouts. Johanna Wonyou debuted as a professional in late 2020 in October, and she's fought 9 times since then. 4 of the 9 were just last year, and she fought 2 times this one. She's been busy, she's been active, and I've talked about Johanna once or twice here on the channel, how she's definitely a fighter to watch moving forward, a very young fighter with a high ceiling. The future of the bantamweight division, and perhaps super bantamweight.
She's only 23 years old.
But better than most. I wouldn't mind seeing Johanna Wonyou share the ring with a seasoned veteran like a Mary Romero or maybe a Maria Secchi, perhaps another unbeaten up-and-comer like herself in Serene Satine. Boundless opportunities at 118 pounds for Johanna, because not only is she very young, with many good years left to give to the sport, but she has a higher ceiling than most others, having already collected the scalps of 2 unbeaten up-and-comers in Wendelin Cruz and Simona Salvatore more recently. That was back in May. That's when Johanna Wonyou last saw action. She's now being co-managed by Brian Cohen, and as stated, that might open some doors for her to perhaps fight once or twice in America moving forward, because she's still young and because she's still in the developmental stage of her career. It's a possibility.
Johanna is best described as a boxer puncher and a mid-range fighter.
Though not limited to just boxing mid-range to inside, she's got the kind of speed, athleticism, and mobility to where she could box comfortably from the outside if the situation calls for it. But Johanna Wonyou, she's actually got some spice.
Shows some spice.
She is cocky, confident, and capable. The way she angles off, moving her head, moving her torso, managing the distance.
Bringing over the right hand, the big right hand. Johanna Wonyou is an orthodox fighter.
There are currently 3 reigning champions in the women's bantamweight division. There is Miyo Yoshida, newly crowned IBF champion. Nina Hughes, reigning WBA champion. And unified WBC and WBO champion of Denmark, Dina Thorsland. Johanna Wonyou, comparatively, is a lot younger than these fighters are, these champions, making the world her oyster. That she's got plenty of time to develop. Time is on her side, especially compared to Miyo Yoshida and Nina Hughes. These are much older fighters than Johanna is.
She's already a force to be reckoned with at just 23 years old.
As time progresses and she continues to develop as a fighter, skilled boxer puncher, she's going to become that much harder to deal with. She is best described as a boxer puncher because she's got the fundamentals of the pure boxer with the boxer puncher's spice and the boxer puncher's spite. She likes to go in there and hurt her opponents or embarrass them if she can. Johanna Wonyou is definitely one to watch out for in the coming year,
and I look forward to seeing more from her.
Men's Super Bantamweight news. Former unified champion MJ Akhmadaliev hopes to face the winner of Inoue versus Tapales. I'm the best guy in the division, but now that the winner has been determined and the outcome has been decided, we know exactly who Mutajan Akhmadaliev means to fight. To me, it's very important. It's the most important fight of my life. The opportunity to fight for 4 world titles for Undisputed. Akhmadaliev said in a video published by Matchroom Boxing on their YouTube page. For me, the most important is my 2 titles, because I believe that they belong to me, and that's something that I want. I have a huge amount of respect for both fighters. I respect every single fighter in the world. I have nothing against Tapales. I know he is not the one who scored the fight. I believe whoever is going to win the fight, I believe I can beat any of those guys, and we know who won the fight. Inoue won the fight. Murodjan Akhmadaliev is one of 3 mandatory challengers already in the queue for the newly crowned super bantamweight champion Naoya Inoue. There is Nery of Mexico. He's the mandatory by way of the WBC. Murodjan Akhmadaliev, he's the mandatory by way of the WBA. And Sam Goodman of Australia, he's the mandatory by way of the IBF. Sam is also ranked at number 1 by way of the WBO. I wonder if he can become the dual mandatory to Naoya Inoue. Well, he's got a full plate. Murodjan Akhmadaliev is on there. Murodjan, who says, that was a tough lesson. I know that I won the fight with Tapales, but the judges saw it differently, so they gave me a lesson. Never let anything slide away from you. I started too slow. I underestimated my opponent. I made mistakes in training camp. I didn't take him too seriously. Now, I changed some things. Murodjan has since rebounded off that loss. In his last fight, he's back in the winner's bracket, and that was a WBA final eliminator, so he's definitely in the queue, but he's still behind Nery, the former champion of Mexico, who Inoue is currently in negotiations with. In the fight with Inoue and Nery, it's got more backstory and more of a profile than a fight with Murodjan, though all of these fights are interesting fights. Every single one of them, the fight with Nery, the fight with Murodjan, and the potential fight with Sam Goodman.
Inoue's got a full plate.
I'm more disciplined. I don't gain too much weight in between fights, and that shows. I know that physically, mentally, and technically, I'm the best guy in the division, and I can prove it against anyone. If they're saying this guy is good, I can beat him. If they're saying this guy is the best, I can beat all of them. And I don't share in that sentiment when it comes to Murodjan. No, I think that Murodjan is very good, very talented, comes from a great amateur background, a skilled southpaw, and a decent-sized puncher. But not on the level of a Naoya Inoue. I don't think that.
Inoue is fighting Nery next anyway.
And you know what I could go for while he does that? I could really go for an MJ Akhmadaliev versus Jonriel Casimero fight. Jonriel Casimero, the former champion, a guy who Inoue mentioned as one of the guys he would like to fight with in the coming year. I could go for that because Murodjan's not going to get his crack at the apple right away. Murodjan, who says, I'm smarter, better, and stronger than anyone he ever faced. Tenuous statement when you did lose to Marlon Tapales. MJ didn't look good in that fight, even though he thinks he deserved to win.
I know triangle theories don't work, I know, but I think it's worth noting that when Inoue fought that same Tapales, he took it out of the judge's hands. MJ couldn't.
I do think MJ will prove to be a more challenging opponent for Inoue than Marlon Tapales was. All I really could give Marlon Tapales in the fight was 2, maybe 3 rounds. 2, maybe 3. 3 if I'm generous.
I think he might do all right, but I still think Inoue beats him.
I'd be really impressed if he stops him. Inoue is a true master, wrote Akhmadaliev on his social media account recently, but I'm smarter, better, and stronger than anyone he's ever faced. It will be a great fight. Let's go, champ. The risk of sounding like a broken record ad nauseum, that Inoue likely beats all these guys at 122, every single one of them, Nery, Murodjan Akhmadaliev, and Sam Goodman. If you ask around, that's likely the sentiment you're going to hear, but maybe it's because the guy I think would give Inoue the most problems, who I think might be his most challenging opponent, well, it's not a guy that's at 122 right now. It's a guy making his way to 118. It's a guy who comes from the land of the rising sun, the same as Inoue. It's Junto Nakatani. 2-division champion Junto Nakatani, who's held the WBO title at both flyweight and super flyweight, and currently he's en route to bantamweight, Inoue's old stomping grounds, to try and win the WBC title from newly crowned champion Santiago Alejandro Santiago, who beat Nonito Donaire for the newly vacated title. If Junto Nakatani can do to him what he just did to one of the Maloney brothers, if he can stay in character at 118 and be who he's been at flyweight and super flyweight, I have the sneaking suspicion that the fight between him and Inoue will be the next super fight when the time comes.
And it might. Junto, in spite of being a 2-division champion, already very accomplished, he's still making a name for himself. I see no reason he can't have the run of the place at 118 if he beats Santiago, that he could go on an undisputed run similar to Inoue's at that weight.
On that same card that he's fighting on, the one in February, we're supposed to be seeing Inoue's younger brother, Takuma Inoue, defend his newly obtained WBA title against former champion Jerwin Ancajas. So what if Junto beats Santiago, becomes WBC champion, then he fights the winner of that fight? And what if the winner of that fight is Takuma Inoue? That sets the stage.
Imagine it. If Takuma beats Jerwin, maybe Takuma can then unify titles with Junto. And if Junto wins, well, that sets the stage for him to fight the big Inoue, the monster.
Just saying, there are a lot of interesting fights in that super bantamweight landscape for Naoya Inoue. Now that he's there and now that he's undisputed champion, they are all gonna have to come after him. That's what they mean to do. But I feel like he beats all those guys, and the fight that has my attention, the fight that could be on the horizon, is a fight with his countrymen, is a fight with Junto Nakatani.
Maybe that can become a super fight sometime down the line, because as far as 122 and the guys that are there, I feel like Inoue beats all of those guys. They're solid fighters, and they're solid guys. But I think Inoue beats all of them.
Finally, in men's heavyweight news, Wallin, on his defeat to Anthony Joshua, I really have no excuses. He was just better. He hit me with some really good shots, and he was just better. It was a much tougher fight than what I had with Tyson Fury. Maybe he's found his home with Ben Davison. This fight and its outcome is what I always predicted, what I always expected, that where Tyson Fury languished, with that same Wallin, a more authoritative puncher and a stronger puncher would be able to simmer him down. Simmer Wallin down. That the reason he was able to take so many chances with Tyson Fury is because Tyson Fury's really not that big a puncher. His bread and butter has always been his movement, and his boxing, and his cerebral method of fighting. But he's not a banger. He's not a knockout merchant.
Allow me to rephrase that. Yes, he can knock guys out, he can, but he's not actually as big a puncher as Anthony.
His perception that Tyson Fury was all of a sudden this huge puncher is all centered around what he did to a one-handed fighter, a limited fighter in Deontay Wilder. That version of Tyson Fury, you only see that version of him with Deontay Wilder, stepping into his jab and smothering the other guy, overpowering him and brutalizing him. Yeah, he did that to Wilder. That's not how he boxed Dillian White. That's not even how he boxed Derek Chisora in their third fight, their pointless trilogy.
It's not even how he boxed Francis Ngannou, a debutant, a novice who never had a professional boxing match. He didn't take the chances with them that he took with Wilder, because with Wilder, you can take those chances. He's got no fundamentals, no coordination, and outside of a big right hand, he ain't got much else.
I always thought that Anthony would knock out Wallin because Tyson Fury, at least to me, he's not what they say he is. What's interesting is that Wallin, having fought them both, he had a much tougher time with Anthony, and he says that perhaps Anthony has found his new home with Ben Davison. When I first heard that Anthony enlisted the aid of Ben, the first thing I thought to myself was, this could work out. This could be a good pairing, perhaps a better pairing even than Anthony and Derek James, steamed like strange bedfellows.
And I don't think that Derek James is a bad trainer for what it's worth. I just think Ben is a better fit. His cerebral approach to boxing, his boxing brain.
The kind of fighter that Anthony's been trying to become over time since having parted ways with his longtime trainer, Rob McCracken.
Right.
The kind of fighter he's been trying to become, that marriage of power and skill,
right,
and Ben Davison's approach to boxing, it seemed like a good fit to me. And the added benefit of being more active this calendar year than he has been in previous years. For a while there, Anthony was averaging one fight a year for the last, 2 years, maybe a little longer than that, whereas this year, he fought 3 times. And it showed the benefit in being a more active fighter. He was sharper.
He was switched on. I told you in the build-up, looks to me like Anthony wants to make a statement, and he did.
Attention now turns to a potential Filip Hrgovic fight for what could be either the IBF interim title or the full title should it become vacant after the first Fury versus Usyk fight. I don't imagine that either fighter, either Alexander Usyk or Tyson Fury, are going to be in the sport much longer, but especially if it's Usyk that wins, if it's Usyk that becomes undisputed champion, and I think he's going to. If he does, I don't imagine he's going to stick around the sport much longer, as there won't be that much left for him to do.
Just imagine, he wins the first fight, and, maybe Fury activates his rematch clause. Maybe he doesn't. In either scenario, the IBF title goes vacant.
At which point, Anthony and Filip can fight for it. But even beyond that, beyond Fury versus Usyk 1 and what could be Fury versus Usyk 2, beyond Anthony Joshua versus Filip Hrgovic, the landscape and the way things are at heavyweight right now, Mahmoud Char is in possession of a WBA regular title, and I don't imagine he's going to have it for all that long. I imagine that Frank and George Warren might set it up to where Daniel Dubois takes it from him, which would make Daniel the next runner-up to become full WBA champion. And what about Zhilei Zhang? He's in position by way of the WBO.
And what about the WBC?
Wilder, he was ranked at number 1, Anthony at number 2, but because Wilder lost the Parker fight, I imagine he's going to lose that number 1 spot, and Anthony will be elevated to number 1. So maybe when the time comes, they can see about fighting for the newly vacated WBC title. Maybe that's the way it could work out. I'm not sure. But the landscape at heavyweight, beyond next year, approaching the end of it, it could very well change.
And these guys that are out there, Daniel Dubois, Filip Hrgovic, Zhilei Zhang, I think Anthony can beat any one of these guys.
With Ben Davison in his corner and being a more active fighter than he has been in previous years, I think Anthony can beat Daniel Dubois, Filip Hrgovic, Zhilei Zhang. I think he can beat Joe Joyce. I think that in terms of what's out there right now and what fighters are in position to perhaps one day become champions, Anthony beats all these guys. Still got some good years left. He's not as old as Tyson Fury, not as old as Deontay Wilder, but still more seasoned as a professional than, say, a Daniel Dubois or a Filip Hrgovic. Even Joe Joyce, who might be older than Anthony Joshua, but he's not as experienced as a pro as Anthony Joshua. No, Anthony has been there and done that in ways that most of these other guys haven't. And what I see is that the landscape is looking promising for what could be another title run for the former champion, for Anthony Joshua.